Yes, and we're back with another episode of Dance Gems. And today we have Michael de Miranda. That's a beautiful name, by the way. And Michael is a musician and knows everything about music and mostly about rhythmical instruments and rhythmical music. He's a percussionist, as we call that. And we never do that, of course, without my good friend Tom. And Ton and I will ask Michael all about music, but also in relationship to dance. Ton, what do you think about that?
Yeah, fantastic, Sean. Yeah, I'm happy to be again in the podcast, a new
Yes,
episode.
a new episode of Dance Jams, and today we're talking with Michael de Miranda. He's actually also Dutch, but he lives in Germany. Shall we ask him in the show, and then we ask him to introduce himself a little bit? I told the audience already that he's a percussionist, but there's of course so much more to know about Michael. What do you think? Let me see if he is there. Hello, Michael. Welcome in Dance Jams. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you both too. Thank you invitation here for your past
Oh yeah,
podcast. I'm
of
really
course.
happy that you asked
Glad,
me. And
glad to have you. Glad to have you.
I,
Can
I
you,
see.
yeah?
Yes, Sean,
Can you
continue.
tell you a
Sorry.
little bit about yourself as a little introduction of who you are, what you do, and then of course, as always, we have a lot of questions for you.
okay, well, um, I am a musician. I'm a percussionist, and I'm specialized in two different styles: Cuban music and Brazilian music. And
Nice.
for this, uh, I went to Cuba a few times. I visited Brazil. And of course, when you study all those instruments and rhythms, then you learn that a lot of influences are from Africa. So I visited Africa a few times, also with a friend. And well, I live in Germany. Nowadays, I have a samba group here that I'm leading to actually, and I'm still composing different styles, Latin, and I like to mix styles, Cuban styles with Brazilian styles, and because of my father, who is a guitarist, a musician, and he's from Suriname, and because of this, I grew up with a lot of music, classical music, because he studied classical guitar, but he's from Suriname, so he loved to play Brazilian music and listen to the Cuban styles. And so I had a lot of music in my family, and yeah, music is actually was has always been a big part of my life, and so
Nice.
I'm still having fun with it.
Yeah. Good. 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 Yeah. No. Well, let's start. Of course, we as Ton and I have a lot of connection with music as dancers mostly. We look at all dances, but both Ton and I actually, our roots are a little bit in what we call Latin ballroom dance style. It's a little bit of a strange name, and we can definitely go a little bit into the roots of that. But yeah, so we have a lot of connection with the music styles that you play. Let's put it that way. Tom, do you
Okay.
have some nice questions for Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. I have nice questions for him. Um, how old you started exactly to do your profession in a professional way? I know you study music before, and yes, maybe we start like that. How you study music, and maybe in a way of you did a school or from your parents, or you get you get out of the country to America or Cuba or Brazil, where you was in your life at that time, and how you are now, how you develop now. So it's more
Yes.
question. So how you get to that level where you are now?
Yeah. Well, it started in my family. It's not only my family, my brother, sister, and but my whole family is playing music. So first, I heard, of course, my father playing. And one day he said, Michael, we are playing Latin music. And or I started playing piano when I was 6 years old. Then I played violin. Then I played the bass. Then I played a little bit guitar. So in our family, when there are instruments, you just grab an instrument and you start playing. And of course, I had lots of teachers. It's not that that I learned everything by myself, but uh, we had a family band, and my father said we play Latin music, and I played drums. And he said, I have some congas. Can you play congas? So I started playing congas. And then I learned more about different Latin styles. Then I went to the conservatory to study there. And then, of course,
And
you get
and where you
a lot
was in a conservatorium? In
in Rotterdam.
Rotterdam.
In
Ah, okay.
Rotterdam is famous because of the world music. They are specialized in world music, so they have all kinds of different styles, flamenco, I don't know, all kinds of different styles, and lots of students all over the world go to Rotterdam to study there because the level is very high. And when I was on the conservatory, of course, I got more information. I went deeper yeah, in the language of percussion, and then I had already made some contact with some Cuban teachers. I learned about Brazilian teachers. So actually, during this study on the conservatory, I already went to Cuba to meet my teacher there, and then I found, of course, other teachers. When I finished the conservatory, I went to Africa because yeah, when they talk about rhythm, they all say it comes from Africa, big influence, and that's true. So I went there to study with different master drummers, and then I went
In
to Brazil.
yes, in all Africa, Michael? In the
No,
whole, or in some, it's different because you have Uganda, you have South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. It's a difference
yes.
there in it then, in the rhythms, in the percussions?
Even within one country, there are so many differences. And they used to have fun with Africa because they always said, well, when you want to learn about rhythms and things, you go to West Africa, and when you want to see the beautiful nature, you go to East Africa. But it's not completely true because in East Africa you also have beautiful rhythms. But the thing is that when you go to Cuba or Brazil, you learn about different rhythms, and then when you go back to where those rhythms came from, then you come to the history of the slavery, and you you find out that some countries like Nigeria, Angola, Congo, uh, they had a big influence on the rhythms in Brazil. Cuba has a different history because not only because of the different Europeans that went to Cuba, but also because Cuba had a big harbor and lots of slaves that came here. It came there. They were divided on two different islands or to the south of the United States. So it means that in Cuba there were slaves from Senegal, from Angola, from Congo, from Ghana, from and um, and this makes Cuba unique because, for instance, when you go to Jamaica, you know it's English. The English people were there; it's their colony, and then in Jamaica you mainly find the slaves that came from the colonies from the English people. But they also came in Cuba, but because the French were there too, the colonies and from Africa, which had different slaves, they also came in Africa, in Cuba, and so because Cuba had so many European influences, it makes it different than the Dutch Antilles, or the because the Dutch had a few colonies, they brought the slaves from there, but Cuba is point. And so when you have this in mind, I thought, okay, I cannot visit all the countries, but I have to go to the West. I learned a lot about the Nigeria, because they had a big influences with the Yorubas that went to South and Latin America. But I went to Senegal and Gambia, not only because of the history, but also because of the instruments. They have certain instruments that when they play it, it immediately comes deep in my heart. Not all the music that I hear, or I don't, I like to analyze what happens, but not everything comes really deep in my body. But the music that, the Sabar music from Senegal, and the Boukarabous, those instruments, wow, when somebody is playing there, I'm mesmerized, and it's whoa. Something happens with my heart. Doom, doom, doom. So that's
Mm.
why I went to those countries.
Cool.
Yes, you have
Cool.
wrote a book about it.
Mm.
You told me, and about the research where everything came from. And can you tell something more about that one? And then we get slowly to our theme, the musicality. But it's also, yes, when I speak with Sean, we speak about enslaves. That's what I learned. To slave, they made them to slave. Yes, and yes, maybe you can tell something about your book, and it's quite interesting when you told it to me, but maybe to our listeners you can tell something about it and show it also. I would say it. I would
Okay, okay.
say yes. Mhm.
I have to. Here, oh, here it is. It's called Blocos Afro, and Blocos Afro, it means groups with an African roots. And I wrote this book about those groups. They are in Salvador da Bahia.
Mm-hmm.
Salvador da Bahia is actually the city with the most African people still living out of Africa. They are in Salvador da Bahia. So the biggest population of Africa living outside of Africa is in Salvador da Bahia. It was also the first capital of Brazil, and because of Bahia means a bay, so it had a natural bay, and that's why the Portuguese made it the first capital. And this is also the reason why lots of different Africans came to Bahia, and this influence of Africa is still enormous there in Salvador. And the groups that play there, they always want to stay in contact with their roots, with Africa. But the nice thing, what happened is that, of course, those slaves, they couldn't bring their own instruments, they couldn't bring their djembes or so when they were free, they used the instruments which were there, and most of the time that were instruments that the Europeans brought there. So they played on snare drums or bass drums, and so when you now listen, for instance, to samba music. We just had the carnival. The biggest carnival is in Brazil, in Rio. And when you look and listen to the rhythms, then of course you can hear some African influences, but the European influence is also big because of the instruments. The Africans didn't they don't play there on the djembes and the doom dooms and the African instruments. So there you have a very nice mixture of African and Europeans. And I analyzed what all those different groups, what kind of rhythms they played. And so I wrote down lots of rhythms and arrangements from all those different groups to
Good to know.
for the people who are
Yeah,
interested.
cool.
Yes.
Why should people read your book, Michael?
uh,
That's
because
always and we are authors, so that's always a question that I get. You know, why should I read your book?
yeah,
Why should I read your
because
book?
because this music is actually popular all over the world. You will,
Mm-hmm.
because of artists like Michael Jackson or Paul Simon, who
Yeah,
worked with groups that are in my book. This music
cool.
went all over the world. And the thing is, it's not old music. It's not music that already exists for hundreds of years. It's not like Africa. No, it's relatively new. The first group started in 1974,
Oh
and
wow.
then actually 1979 and 1980, then the other groups came. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
relatively new music. And once you hear those rhythms and you think, okay, I'm looking for books or who wrote about it.
Ah,
There aren't
I
many books.
understand it.
Nice. Like that
Yes.
famous,
They.
yeah, that
Yes.
famous album from Paul Simon. Was that made with them?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. That was in
Exactly.
the
I
eight. That
want
was
to
only in the
just.
eighties, I guess, right? Yeah,
Yes,
that's
Yes.
cool.
and it
I
was
Nice.
had the same
very.
question, Sean.
And the thing
Yeah.
is, so because it's relatively new,
Yeah.
there are not many people that did research about this music. There was
Mm-hmm.
only one author that wrote about the groups and but didn't write that much about the music, but also a little bit about the music, but more about the history of how did those groups
Mm.
start to get famous or how was the development. And because there was only one book and it was in of course in Portuguese, I thought, well, there's more. I wrote about the history too a little bit, but not too much because there's so much
Too
happened.
much. Too much. Yeah.
Too much.
Cool.
And I want to stay with the rhythms. So I
Yeah.
just
So is it
focus.
only interesting for people who are playing instruments or me as a dancer? Is it something that I would, what would be my takeaways from that book? If I finish your book, you know, what would
Yeah,
be the, yeah,
it's not only interesting for musicians or percussionists. Of course, percussionists are
of course.
interested in the rhythms, and of course, but
Yeah.
as a dancer, I think
Yeah.
it's very interesting because when you start to understand how these rhythms are built up, the different levels of frequencies of when you hear a samba reggae and when you hear only the low drums, the big surdos that play this doom, chicka, doom, ding, doom, chicka, doo, diggy, ding, chicka, ding, ding, boom, you will move different than when you hear the snare drums, the tuku-chaka, 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 tuku-taraka, tuku-chaka. That as a dancer, I think it's very interesting to hear the different instruments and the timing, the swing, and the different frequencies. And all those instruments have a different role in the music. Some are just the pulse, just the beat.
Yeah.
But what happens between those beats and how it is filled in and how it completely makes when you hear everything and you have the complete melody. I think as a dancer, it's very interesting to
Yeah.
see the possibility to translate those rhythms to
To
your
movement.
body, to your
To movement.
movement.
Yeah. Now we'll
Yeah.
make sure that the title of your book and where you can get it, that it's come in the what we call the show notes, Michael. So
Okay.
hopefully our audience, our listeners and viewers will get that interest. I'm
Yeah.
totally agreeing with you. specifically in certain style of dances where we only learn to dance on one rhythm. This is open your eyes. Can I ask Tom before we go further something about Cuba and the instruments there? So I had lesson in Cuba from a university professor there, Michael. He's an anthropologist, and he did research towards, the history how dance and music came about in Cuba, and he told us also about, the Spanish influence and, of course, the multiple African influence instead of one region, which was highly dominant. But he spoke specifically about the emerging of the guitar, the rumba tres, um, and that he said it was actually not a rumba tres; it was literally a guitar that just missed a few snares, but the guy had to play at a party. True or not, he said it's maybe a legend or not, but they just made everything into an instrument and they play at a party. They loved it so much, and that is the legendary history of the Roomba Trust. Now, we thought it was all a good, fun story, but it could actually be true if I listened to you, because they had to just make do with whatever they had. Is it a true story or not, Michael?
Well, I don't know this story, of course, but I like the story, and it
I like
could
the
be
story
true
too.
because when you are poor and living in Cuba,
Yeah, yeah,
you want to make music. I think you all already know that a lot of poor countries, they are very creative. You have to be
you
creative
have to
if you want
agree.
to dance or you want to
Yeah,
make music. Nowadays we order online a nice dress or a
yeah,
guitar. But
yeah. Maybe
if
we
it
should tell the audience a little bit what the Roomba Tress is. Can you explain it a little bit? Uh,
Yes, a tres is actually it's a guitar. It's a little bit shorter than a normal guitar, and they have three strings, but double strings. That means for one note you have two strings, and the way they are playing on it, it is closer to the piano. What When the piano plays in son music or in those Cuban styles, they call it huajeo, and it's also, let's say, he's playing rhythms on a piano, but he has a lot of possibilities to hit a lot of white and black notes
mm,
where he can, and the tres is actually doing the same. So he's playing rhythms. Of course, there's the harmonics, the chords are there in a certain scale, okay, but the rhythms are Latin or African. And it means that when you have a chord, uh, very often you play on a guitar, you play the complete chord. Drum. And on a tres, you are breaking this chord apart and you play three notes. Dun, dee, dong, dong, dee, dong, ding, dong, ding, dong, ding, dee, dong, dee, dong. You don't play rung, the complete chord, but you
correct.
break it in a certain, very
Yeah,
often, African rhythm.
yeah.
And that's the tres.
Yeah, so for the listeners, and interested in Latin music, that's why it's such a dominant instrument in the rumba music for this reason. So thank you that that gave us good information, right, Tom? Tom, I'm sure
Yeah.
Yes,
you have
yes.
a lot of other
So
questions.
Michael Jackson and Paul Simon are inspired by Bahia de Brazil there, the music there. And also what I know, the actually samba comes from that city then, or that area, and not from Rio. Is that correct?
When I say this, the people from Rio will be angry. But um, they say that the samba comes from Bahia, and that it went to Rio, and there it developed in something big and new, and it became faster, and later it went back from Rio back to Bahia. And for instance, in my book, wow, I don't know if I wrote it down, but the first group that existed in 1974, they you didn't have samba schools like in Rio. And when the samba from Rio got back to Salvador da Bahia, this group thought, wow, this is so fast. They were playing, and they said, well, that's too fast. We are going to slow it down. And they created a new rhythm called Afro Samba. And that's again slower, and
Nice.
they
Yeah.
changed it. But
Yeah.
I think I don't know, but I think the samba started in Bahia, went to Rio, and then
Go back.
went
Back.
Go
go
back.
But
back.
it's a
Yes,
good
yes.
history too for the people who are listening. And then often in the ballroom we say we dance samba, and without having almost no context, and you just gave it in 2 seconds. Because then people that don't know what I'm talking about, they go to YouTube and they type in samba and they see all these ladies with the feathers on their butt and the guys dancing like this and say, "Oh, Jean, that's a completely different samba." And they said, in the past I couldn't give an answer. Luckily, I did my homework, but you said it so much nicer than I did. So hopefully, listeners,
Mm.
you see that the words that we sometimes use in the ballroom dancing, if it goes to Latin, are just sometimes completely taken out of context. But luckily, there is context again.
So,
They also
yes.
said that the name samba comes
Hmm.
from African dance, from Angola.
Mm-hmm.
They say it comes from samba, and samba is an African dance, and it's a belly dance. And when a man invites a woman to dance, and he has to touch with his belly, has to touch the belly of the woman, and when the woman says, okay, I would like to dance, then they dance, and when the woman says no, then not. But that's a little bit what they think, that the name samba, that it comes from Africa, from this samba, so it's from a dance. Interesting for you.
Interesting.
From a belly then. So when I look the ballroom version of samba, then that looks like we dance on cold ice. And when I would dance on the sembe, then I would dance on hot sand.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I have the comparison for me in my brain how a European samba looks then on cold ice. And
Cool.
yes,
Yeah.
so this is actually important to go back to the roots, and this is why you see CD or your new CD called Roots and Wings.
Roots and
But
wings.
we come later to it. I have one other question, and this is musicality, and this is where we find each other. Hopefully, you are a musician, a composer, author, etc., researcher, explorer. But we are also that, but in dancing. And now for the listener, I think it's interesting to know what is the comparison between the musician and the executor for dancer, because the musician, when he plays, he is primary the artist at that moment, and the dancer is following secondary that sound of that artist what is playing there.
Mhm.
And what you understand under musicality. So that is
Yeah,
actually my question.
yeah, yeah. I understand that the way of thinking that the music, let's say the music is first there, and then the dances come to it. But very often it's the other way around. That it starts with, or the musicians have to follow the dancers, and also in Africa that the way um, they make music. You immediately think in instruments, but you can find also lots of videos on YouTube that when uh, the women, when they have the corn and they have to, how do you call it in English, to make it small and they dance
Grind it, yeah, to grind it, yeah.
yeah, yeah, they do it in dancing, and dancing gives them lots of it makes the work easier, because you dance and it's not only working, it's also a kind of emotion that gives you the energy to do this for several hours, and chunk, and when they do it together, they're then a rhythm comes to it, because they do it in a rhythm, but it is immediately a combination of dance and
Rhythm.
rhythm.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And labor.
and labor. Yes,
Hmm.
it makes the labor a little bit lighter, I think. That's what I. It's not only with harvesting, but with lots of things that they start. When they do it while they are dancing or they are making a rhythm, it becomes lighter. This work. Um, but about musicality, um,
Yes.
for me. Uh, I think, yeah, I think in music and dance, it's almost the same. You know, for musicality, you need knowledge, you need the technique, you need timing, you need a big repertoire of knowledge about rhythm or history, or um, because if you know only one rhythm, or you know one instrument, one rhythm, then there's not much musicality. It can be very musical just to play this, but for me, it has to do with dance, or with audience, or with it is for me it's a kind of communication, and that's for me dance is also a kind of communication, and uh, there is a lot of interaction normally. I think in when you do the competition in ballroom, okay, you study, you have your knowledge, but uh, and the music is a strict arrangement. It lasts so much time. The tempo, everything is fast, is there, and it's not with a live orchestra that can react on the dancer. Hey, they are
Yes.
the feet are doing this. We can react on this, and well, no, no, no. But normally, uh, when I make music, for me, it's not only about the rhythms that I play, or am I playing it loud or fast, or those things. It's about I want to reach somebody. I want to touch somebody with my music, and for this you need musicality, so you can the musicality on a when I drink 7 cups of coffee is different than when I'm outside. Now it's cold outside, and when I have to play there, my music, I have a different kind of exchange of uh, rhythm
S-
or
Yes.
communication as when it's sunny in the summer.
So
Or
when I understand that well, so when you are in a different space in a different time also, or the combination of it, then you play also different.
exactly, yes, of course,
Yeah.
yeah. For me,
Yes.
but you need to have the possibility to.
To do
So
that,
when
yeah.
I don't have a good technique
Mm.
and
Mm.
I can only play one thing, then it will be the same
Mm.
in the cold of
Yeah.
or on the North Pole, or
Yeah.
it-
So in dance, or at least in some dance studies, one of them I did, is we call it strand of the medium, right? So know your environment, know your own, proprioception in this case, right?
Yeah.
And one of my teachers always said, the dancer who knows, if it comes to competitive dancing, by the way, but one of the things, if you know as a dancer your strength of the medium, know the temperature of the room and all the things that Tom talked about, light, everything, you
Yeah.
have a leg up, so to speak. No pun intended in this case, but
Mhm.
so it gives you an advantage or a benefit than just thinking that you always have to execute exactly the same thing over and over again. Yeah,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
and then basically you say that too. I think it's interesting what you said, because I don't think that a lot of people, specifically the ballroom audience, knows that there are actually, ways of playing music where the musicians actually react on the dancers. We play typically on a strict tempo, and even if it's a live orchestra, they don't do that there. They don't look at the dancers. But I
Yeah.
grew up also studying Indonesian dance, where it's 100% where the band follows the dancers. And for me, that was so difficult at the beginning, because I learned it from cassettes. No one knows anymore who cassettes is. So, but seems to be very nice, Michael. You say that for me is musicality, when you can
Yeah.
follow the dancers, when you can follow your fellow musicians, when you look at the audience. For you, that's musician. How would you translate that back to us? That's an interesting
Um,
question.
to us, yes,
As a
I made
dancer,
as
yeah,
a dancer. Yes, I
yeah.
I see it like that. I sent you a picture. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
can bring it in, Sean, if you can find it. Normally, not normally, usually
Yeah.
we dance on different tracks. It's like as a train, you have one track. But if are several tracks in a big city, you have like 12 tracks. And each track has a different, how I could say that, uh, flavor. One
Yeah.
track could be the drum, the other track is the triangle, the other track is the piano, the other track is the violin, the other track is the bongo, and then you have a track if there is a singer there. You
Mm-hmm.
have also the lyrics on it, and you could also put sound effects on another track, like a wind or like walking, yeah, that you bring it in, and rain and thunder. So, and then depends what the external perceiver hear. That's also different, because you could hear, say, the upper one is the green one is the wind, and the other one hears, how I would say, the thunder, or another one hears the how you say, the singing on that one track. And then it's a free interpretation of each person which one he want to use. That's
Which
like in
track?
hip hop also,
Yeah.
which track he wants to use.
Okay.
Or the wind, like, and you are doing fluid movements, or you hear the water like in the ocean, like you could use that, or the singing, the voice, and then you could interpretate the singing and the lyrics. This is what they do in hip hop, lyrical dancing, or the percussion, because actually the most of our dance forms, like Lindy Hop or like jazz or like hip hop, it comes actually from Africa, and it, of course, it has a evolution. And if I want to be musically, I use one of these tracks and I translate it into an art form of movement. And with the structure what I have learned, so when the samba, I take now a samba, chung, ka-tung, 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 then we have a fixed rhythm. I could use that fixed rhythm, And when there would be a free rhythm in it, that's a quite strange rhythm what I made now with my mouth, but then you could use it and you are symmetrically on a sound and movement, or you are in the asymmetric and you ignore the wind and you ignore the tracks and then you dance it. But what I see mainly in the jazz and also in the hip hop and also in the ballroom dancing, it's quite strange in the Latin world and ballroom Latin American world. We dance more on the whole beats, on the same metronome dancers, on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we start again new. But this is maybe the heart of the tempo of the music, but it's not the musicality. The musicality is what is in between of the beats, in between one and two on that track, on track one or track two, on track three. And if you can find this, what is in between, and not just what is on the end, then yes. And I understand that musicality for each person is different because each person has a different luggage, backpack, so they have a different mind and a different body sensation at the end, and then you come to a different conclusion how everybody could understand the musicality. That's how I see it. And I don't know how you see that, Michael.
Yeah, I think so too. That the you have a pulse. First you talk about is it a waltz, is it a four quarter or boom? That's about the pulse and how many pulses are in one beat or in one measure, and perhaps the tempo. But um, how this beat is, so as I call it, subdivided, that gives the atmosphere. Or is it a samba, or is it polka, or is it, there are differences in how they divide it. For instance, if you have jazz or shuffle music, where it's very much the beat is just 1, 2, 3, 4 in triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it's different than 1, 2, 3, 4 it's different. And also when you do the same, it can be the same tempo, but when you know how the beat is subdivided and what kind of feeling this subdivision gives, then uh, you can translate this to dance, and you can translate it to arms, or not only the feet on the beat like you said, Ton, but what can you do with this subdivision of the beat, and how is the swing, how is the timing? And this is also, like you said, a big main part of the musicality. Yes, is that what you meant? Or-
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and the harmony between all these tracks and also the executor on that floor
Hmm.
um, is also something, and I call it, and I call it internal perceiver. How you perceive all these sounds through your body, through your stomach, through your ear, and how you translate that on that floor. And then you get the external perceiver, how he perceives that with their eyes and how he watched to it and how he uses his ears to listen to all the sounds.
yeah,
Yes, you need a full uh, focus to that one. If you not have a full focus to it, you
Mm.
probably you see something moving on some sounds on the music, and but there is more to it,
Yeah.
and
This-
without any judgment to it. I think not. I'm think when I say I'm not sure about it. I'm sure about it. Everybody perceive uh, the music and the execution different from it, and that's quite unique and beautiful also from it. And if you telling then what is right and wrong in musicality, because there is no Bible in it. There is a you learn a structure like in the beginning, all this research, you learn all these techniques, what is there, but technique, you know where the techniques come from. The technique come from the art, actually from the art. uh, the technique developed, and from
Yeah.
there um, is a evolution from it, and it developed from there. And you cannot hear music and dance that must be like that, because then the external perceiver give a judgment on how it should be. And it could be like that, yes, I'm agree, but there is no good and wrong in it. That's what I understand of musicality when you listen to it and execute to it. Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
true.
so
And
there is something else going on there, Tom.
Mhm.
If you
And that
take a
is
dance student and you say a cha-cha is this, say it's 1 2 3 4 and 1 2 3 4 and 1, you focus that person immediately only on the instrument that plays that rhythm. What happens
Mhm.
in the psyche of that person is that it blocks out the other instruments and it becomes a longer way for them to hear the other rhythms. In cha-cha music, and Michael could support me or disagree with me, you would have an equal instruments who play stronger on the whole counts, the even counts, and you have instruments that play strong, equally strong, because there is no difference actually, it's just a different instrument
Mhm.
on the
yeah,
uneven counts. Then you have, of course, instruments that even put that all aside and like a clave who just kind of switch, from 1 4. So it what I discovered over time is what you focus the student on in the beginning too much, 1 2 3 4 and 1, for a long time they have a hard time to deviate from that rhythm and that instrument.
yeah, that's
So that
it's
is the perception that I think, teachers needs to be very aware of, and that's why Michael comes in so nicely because he just takes every instrument and looks at the character of that instrument, and then you compose it together and you have a thing. He would probably never say, "Oh, but the most important thing is." There is maybe a
yeah,
character he said in a music that makes it a waltz or a cha-cha or a rumba or whatever.
yes, yes. For
Yeah.
instance, cha cha cha. You know the you have the timbales, and on the timbales there are the cowbells,
Yeah.
and the cowbell in cha 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 is most of the time playing just the beat, just this tock 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 tock. But because of this instrument, you don't feel what kind of swing it has. When you hear a guiro, this how do you call it? This
Yeah.
calabash with all
Yeah.
this,
Yep.
and you
Yeah.
Yep.
exactly, and it's playing this. Krr, chaka, trr, chaka, trr. Then you already hear more. Then you think, okay, so you have the bell, the tock tock, and you hear this. Trr, cha, trr, chaka, trr. Okay, then you know something what happens between all those notes of the bell. But then when you hear the congas, they play the main accents are before the beat is 1 2 3 4 and 1 2 pak, doom doom tak tiki doom doom. But on the first beat, well, he's playing a note, but you don't hear it. And if you hear the character of the bass and the piano, then you start understanding. Okay, cha 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 is has it's in a 4/4 and it's Cuban. But if I take son music, also 4/4, and I take it in the same tempo, you will hear a completely different atmosphere of music. The instruments are playing completely different, and also the bass in cha 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 very often this dum ti dum ti ti dum ti dum ti ti dum chi gum chi chi trrr chi gum. You hear this. When I hear this cha cha cha, I don't need to hear anything else. That's cha cha cha. I don't need to hear the congas or the violin or the sing. I know this is cha cha cha. But in some music, the bass player won't play this doom ti doom ti ti doom. No, doom chkum doom chkum gum gum. Same tempo, perhaps a different harmony that can be. But I can hear when somebody's playing this doom chkum gum, then I think, okay, that's not really cha cha cha. So it's the complete arrangement of instruments and settings did it, that is what makes a cha-cha-cha. And as a
Yes.
dancer, it's very useful to know that there is a guiro and that there is a conga, and because you can use it in your, it's not only the steps that you make, this one chick three cha 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 chick chick cha cha. No, what's happening with the guiro, what you can use it in your movement, in your body. Yeah,
Yes.
important.
Yes. Yes. What I heard also for Sean, and this is also how we worked in the beginning. Now I work differently. I count, but I count just to begin with it. And each person who learn dance, then it's maybe out of that count and it's in a different count. That's okay for me. We start at the same time, and then uh, all these dances go in a. They perceive it differently. So we learn them in the beginning to dance on that count: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. And after, um, we learn them to dance between the beats. But if you could, it, that's what I now do with my children. I'll let them guess how many tracks there are in it and which instruments or what they hear in the tracks.
Yeah.
Somebody say, I hear the voice, here I hear drum, there is a piano, there's a violin. Okay, and which one you want to take now from it? The violin or the voice? It's up to you now. And this, I feel now, it works much more nicer because they perceive not only the counts, but they discover that there are counts in it. But all this music, they not play out of the counts. They just play between it, but they are still on it. And maybe just before or just after, but they are in harmony in that piece of music. And this is the most beautiful. What I wanted to say is actually people hear the whole life music, but actually they not listen to it. They listen maybe to the text, but they not listen. Oh, what instruments are in it? Or there are drums. That's what I perceive from the people. I said, did you listen to it? Did you really listen to it, or you just hear the music? That's a completely different story then. And yes, and actually, I come to my next question, and how the music is built up for you. And as a musician, I asked before the podcast already to be safe, how you farce, or how you say that, the music, how you divide the music. Do you listen to other music, how that built up that music, and or you are just busy to enjoy that music what you hear? That would be interesting.
Yeah. Well, for me, music, I am always analyzing. So when there is music, I listen to it, and I immediately listen to. Most of the time, I don't listen to the lyrics at first. Perhaps I listen to the melody, but only when the melody has a certain tension with the harmony. when there's a certain tension, then I'm triggered. Then I want to know, hey, what's going on there? But when there is no tension and it's only about text, somebody wants to tell something, then okay. But when I listen, I immediately listen, of course, to the rhythm. What kind of instruments make the rhythm? What is the bass player doing? Uh, in the mid frequencies, what is the piano, or when there's guitar, what are they doing? Not only harmonically, but also what kind of rhythms do they use? And so for me, I analyze actually all the music that I hear. It doesn't matter if I'm here in Germany listening to Deutsche Schlager or that I'm listening to Cuban, or that I listen to R&B, rap music, or and for me, but that's very personal. When there's not much tension in the music, I want to hear something else. I get bored very quickly if there's not if the music is not interesting to me. Uh, and the music can be interesting for me when there is tension in the rhythm, or tension in the melody, or the rhythm of the melody, or in the harmonics. Those are the essential things for me. And if it's not there, and there's a lot of music that that don't have this tension, then I'm bored. Then
Yeah. You
But
analyze it then.
it's
I do the
personal,
same.
as you say.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's personal.
Hmm.
You analyze it then, and I do exactly the same because I put 15,000 hours on research in it, and I look always exploring new things. And then
yeah,
when I see its fixed patterns in it, then I'm also get not bored, but I think, okay, I don't want to perceive that at that moment because they repeat themselves constantly.
yeah,
And then I think, okay, that's a pity for my time that they repeat themselves. So I'm not forced to look. That
yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Is there a golden standard? Oh, sorry. React on that one, Michael. Sorry.
For me, it's also, there are a lot of different styles that have lots of different. They have borders, and the border can be the tempo. The border can be how what kind of beat it is, or the harmonic scales can be and it's not that I don't like the borders. There when there is rap music, you don't have to expect that there's lots of things happening harmonically, that it's kind of jazz, or in the but but still, when there are borders, then the tension comes when people are on this border, or sometimes go over this border and then back. Then there is tension, and that can be in a rhythm, it can be in the melody, it can be everything. But that's, for me, that is important,
Or in your latest album, you cross the borders of music styles, right? Where you go from Cuban into more Brazilian styles, which is also a tension, right? The purists might say, "Oh, shame on you, Michael. You can never do that." There will always be people like that. But yeah, so yeah, that's good. So you said, and Ton said the same thing. We know so much about it that it's a hard time for me to really listen to it without analyzing it. Well, me as a teacher, I would like to teach you something here a little bit. It took me a while back to just go and just really perceive the way it's brought to me, and without trying to analyze it, and compare it a little bit to soup and a cook. And if you get served soup and you only try to discover what the ingredients are you truly trying to taste the soup, or are you just analyzing? So, and that's a very common thing, of course, with specialists in a field. But we have to make that circle back. I'm an old guy, so I I can say that. You know, you have to circle back and try to taste the soup as a whole too. You know,
Yeah,
Yes, but if you eat every day the same soup for 1 year long, Sean.
well, we don't. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I'm just saying every time when someone serves me the soup, I try to first taste the
Yes.
soup as it is before I immediately start to, analyze. That's just my
Yes.
personal way of,
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, nice to see it also from that way,
Yeah.
Sean. Thank you
It,
for
it
that one.
I had to learn that too, by the way. For a while I
yeah,
didn't want to go to competitions because I was bored out of my mind, right? And
Yes.
but lately I must say, hey, a beginner dancer could be as interesting as an experienced dancer if I try to just see it as it presented to me. Just
yeah.
saying.
Yes.
Just saying.
But I remember your words, Sean, in
Yes.
earlier podcast. You said
Yes.
it's not what they do, but
It's how
how
they
they
do
do
it.
it.
That is so true, Tom. That is so
Yeah.
Yes.
true. And that is
So,
probably
and
true for music too. It's not what they do,
it's not
it's how
about good and wrong. It's about, yeah, in music too. Yeah,
it's
yes,
how
Yeah.
they do it.
correct.
But
It's how
it's
they
not.
do it. And also in dancing, it's not about good and wrong. That's not a judgment. It's just you look as an expert to something where you get surprised.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
how far a dancer goes into that one or a musician. And then, yes, for one who is not playing music and the one is not dancing, maybe it's maybe they understand this different, but this is the way how I do it. But I will remember that soup, Sean. So I will taste that soup and I will not analyze that. Yeah. Thank you very much for that one.
Yeah, I just
but
wanted to bring it a little bit light, and I have to, by the way, because we are a little bit at the end of our podcast.
Oh,
And oh
that's a
my gosh,
pity.
Michael, there is so much more that just only you listening, making the sound of the music with your voice and your mouth is already, I think, something incredible. That for sure. I know that maybe as a little bit of an ending of it. I know Ton, you and Michael have decided to work together. Is that more closely together?
Yes, yes. 20 years ago, I made the
Yeah.
rhythm to result
Yes.
music.
Yeah, I still
Seven
have it.
CDs.
I still
Yes,
have
you
it.
still have it.
Hmm.
They're still on the market. 7 CDs with 25 tracks on each CD, and my proprioception music I have, and um, and I asked Michael if I could make with him together a second version of it, and with acoustic music and his beautiful voice, so we could hear already in the podcast his rhythms when he make that. That's really fantastic to move on also. And yes, I'm so happy that he said yes, let us do that. So we will approach it step by step, small steps. It will not a project what is finished in 1 month, so it take maybe a year, maybe 2 years. I don't know how long we will take for it, but yes, I'm so happy and glad and honored that he will make this with me together. So yes, wonderful. Thank you, Michael, for that one.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
yeah,
So that only means that we will have Michael back more often in our show, and maybe we can go very specifically more into, let's say, that field where dancers meet music and musicians. I think that's an interesting thing. I would almost say, guys, we should do that live in some sort of a setting too, where musicians meet
Wow,
dancers and
that's a
and
nice
and
idea, Sean.
well, remember when I was in Cuba, I danced 3 4 days, for 8 hours straight every day. No joke, on live musician, and it made all the difference. It made all the difference
Oh,
of
I
understanding
understand
each
that.
other, of understanding rhythms, where they just could say, "Okay, conga, just stop for a little bit and then keep dancing." Oh, wow. I'm
The
lost, and
making
that
of.
meant, so that meant that I was only focusing on the conga. Does that make sense? So it was
Yes.
it was great. I have many stories. I'm sure you have more, but that would be a great idea, right? I think there are
Yes,
there.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it brings me to ideas, also more ideas. But first, we start with the rhythm to result,
Rhythm to
and
results.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, and
Hmm.
yeah, great idea. So
All right. Well,
different
Michael,
project.
from our side, it was a pleasure and an honor to have you in our show. People who are listening will and viewing, we will definitely make sure that you can find the music and Michael's book. Of course, you can also just find it on YouTube. Just saying,
Yeah. Oh, on
just
Spotify, it's
and on
everywhere
Spotify
almost.
everywhere.
Yes,
So
and maybe you can show the CD also, your if you
Yes.
have it by the hand, and
I-
yes,
Oh, good. Huh?
roots
Yeah.
and
And
wings, and
Roots
just
and
like
and you
Wings.
can also book lessons with him or for congresses or seminars. Um, he travel all around the world, and yes, you can also have online lessons with him. This is great from a distance, and actually, Michael said it also before in the Dutch podcast. Actually, every dancer have to play an instrument and
Yes.
understand the instruments.
I think so. Yes.
At least a instrument. Yeah, that would be.
A instrument,
Yeah,
yes,
that would be good. All right, thank you, Michael. With that, I say, Ton, this was another episode of Dance Gems. You know, and if you want to, Michael, you we can go back into the Zoom and then we do a little bit after talk. But to our audience, we are already going to say goodbye. And
good,
this was Michael de Miranda, Roots and Wings of Rhythm. It was fantastic, Tom. Thank you for the
more than
connection.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes, more
and
than fantastic, Sean. Inspiring.
inspiring for sure. As always, I'm going to start the music and I say goodbye to you too, Tom. See you in the next episode, of course.
Yes,
This was Dance Jams. Um, we are always to be found on Spotify, Dance Dash Jams, YouTube, on at Ton Greten /podcast, or of course on our own website at jam.dance podcast. But we're also on Apple and other in other how do you say the channels. This was Jean and Ton with Dance Jams, and we say bye bye, bye bye, Ton.
bye bye.